On Larry King Now, she's the iconic voice of Lisa Simpson, Yeardley Smith.
I love my character so much, and I would say that about Lisa Simpson even if I didn't voice her. She's truly one of the great female characters ever created for the small screen.
Do you think it'd go beyond 30 years?
You know what? I've been wrong about this answer so much, I now stop predicting.
As a kid, were you teased about your voice?
Oh my gosh, so much. And it sort of sounds exactly the same as it did when I was 7. I feel like, hey, who has the last laugh now, so.
Plus.
Hi, Lisa Simpson.
Would you like your own show?
Yes, I would. Thank you. From your lips to God's ears, Larry.
When do they give you one?
They don't believe in the girls. Is that true? That's sad.
All next on Larry King Now. Welcome to Larry King Now. Our special guest is Yeardley Smith, the Emmy Award-winning actress, voice actress, comedian, and playwright. Yeardley is best known, of course, as the voice of Lisa Simpson on The Simpsons, which just completed its 28th season, making it the longest-running scripted series of any kind in American history. And other than that, it's a failure. In front of the camera, we've seen Yeardley in shows like Herman's Head and Dharma and Greg, and films like Maximum Overdrive and As Good as It Gets. Her newest film, Miles, is available on video on demand, and we'll talk about Miles in a minute. 28 years, you have been with us from the start.
Yes.
How did you get the part of Lisa?
It's sort of a, I feel like it's a Lana Turner discovered in the drugstore kind of story. I was doing a really small play at a tiny theater in Los Angeles, and the casting director who ended up casting The Simpsons a year later came to see that play. I'm not kidding, like 17 people saw this play, and she was one of them. And she remembered me and said, come in and read for this voiceover. Actually, first they had me read for Bart. But
Really?
but I sound so much like a girl that lasted about 7 seconds, and they were like, no, how about the sister? And I'd never done voiceover before, and I had no interest in doing it. So it wasn't like, oh my God, this will be great. I thought, ugh, who wants to do that? This isn't part of my plan to rule the world. So, but I went, and thank goodness I did.
Did you ask the guy who saw you in the theater what he saw in you?
It was actually a woman, and that's a good question. I think she felt like I had such an unusual
Pitch?
take and an unusual pitch, for sure. But she was dead. She said she knew right from the outset, I know who should play Lisa Simpson.
Does Lisa talk just like you talk, or do you?
No, I do it. And I sort of had not that many options because I am the only person on the show who does one voice. Although about every 5 years I get to do an old woman, which I feel like is just sort of a gimme. But
Lisa Simpson sounds like this.
so I squeeze my throat off a little bit, which is really counterintuitive when they make me sing, which they make me sing a lot on that show. But I love Lisa Simpson. And I remember thinking I sound like I'm about 12 in real life, and they told me that Lisa was 8, so I thought, well,
Then I should probably go up.
You go up a little. Did you think it would be a hit?
oh no, when we started, we were doing the little 20-second bumpers on the Tracy Ullman show, and they shoehorned them into that sketch comedy show just before the commercial breaks, and they told a whole story in about a minute. And then we broke off to a half-hour series after 2 seasons of Tracy Ullman, and everybody said, Fox is crazy. This is the worst idea that a network has ever had. There hasn't been an animated show on in primetime since the Flintstones. And then we hit so big. I mean, so big. We were a mid-season replacement, so we started in January of 1990, although the first half-hour episode to air was the Christmas special in 1989.
How many movies did you do?
For The Simpsons, so far only 1, and people are clamoring for a second.
Why not a second?
I think they really want to make sure that it is as good as and does justice to the first. They don't want to just crank out a sequel. I don't know, Larry.
As a kid, were you teased about your voice?
Oh my gosh, so much.
Because you have an unusual voice.
I do, and it sort of sounds exactly the same as it did when I was 7. But I feel like, hey, who has the last laugh now? So.
650 episodes.
Yes.
I've done 2.
Yes, you have.
Now, you work with the other characters. When I worked, I did it alone. I was in a studio, just dropped the pages on the floor with the writers sitting there.
Right. We always prefer to have our guest stars come in and record with us if their schedules will permit. And we do it all together like an old radio play, which is actually quite unusual. A lot of animated shows, you just go in and do it by yourself. For instance, when we had the Family Guy Simpsons crossover, I went to the Family Guy studios and I read all of Lisa's lines by myself.
They do it by themselves, right?
They do. But I just think it's better. It's more like a conversation, right? The way you say a line will obviously inform the way I respond. So while I can do Lisa Simpson in a vacuum, if I need to, I prefer to do it with my other cast members anyway.
You have a lot of guest cameos, too, right?
We do.
All right, 28 years. It's going to be 30 years. You signed a 2-year, right?
Yes, we are going to go through season 30, which we're just in the middle of recording season 29 now. And we have one more after that. And I think we're probably about halfway done.
On reflection, why has it worked?
You know, I really think that a big part of that is that we get no studio or network notes. Because it's sort of that thing where you can't have too many cooks spoiling the soup. And if you have too much input coming from all sides, then somebody has to steer the ship. And so the writers write for themselves. And I think if you were to do a spreadsheet of really successful shows, and what's the one thing that The Simpsons has that nobody else has, and it is that we get no studio and network notes. It's the only thing. And I
doesn't bug you.
That's true. And that was a provision that James L. Brooks, our executive producer, said, I'll only do the half-hour shows if that's one of the rules. And they were like, okay, because, you know, this show will never last anyway. So.
How is James?
Oh, he's well. We see him every week.
Still doing movies?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he, you know, he's such a brilliant storyteller, too.
He is.
And he comes and to every read-through and then works with the writers to revise the script. I just really admire his continued involvement.
The truth, Yeardley. You ever get tired of it?
You know what? I don't. Sometimes you get tired of something just because you want to stay home that day. But I have to say, I love my character so much. And I would say that about Lisa Simpson even if I didn't voice her. She's truly one of the great female characters ever created for the small screen.
Because?
Because she's funny, and she's empathic, and she's super smart, and talented, and resilient. She's so unbelievably resilient. Like, you know, she doesn't have any friends. Nothing ever really seems to work out for her. She has to live in the same house as Bart Simpson, and the girl never gives up. I have great admiration.
Age, right?
And she doesn't age. So she's been 8 for 30 years. And the funny thing is that she's 8 on the show, and then if she has a birthday, she's 8, and then she turns 8, and we just don't talk about that.
When we return, we're talking Yeardley's on-screen career, including her newest film, Miles. Stay with us. We're back with Yeardley Smith, the voice of Lisa Simpson, and you'll see her in Miles, available in video on demand. Acting on stage was your first love, right?
I
you
love
get
it.
a chance through the years to do theater?
Not as much, no. And it's very, theater in Los Angeles is obviously quite different than it is in New York. We have a lot of what we call equity waiver theaters, so 99 seats or less. And it's a very different kind of grassroots theater scene here. But no, the shorter answer is I don't get to do it as much as I would like.
Does your voice hurt you on getting other roles?
Probably. You know, it's so specific, and sometimes people can't get past it. I remember when I did Mad Men, I just did a tiny little role on Mad Men, and the executive producer, he came up to me and said, Yeardley, we're so happy to have you here. We wanted to give you a better role, a bigger role, but you're not a blender. I was like, thank you, I think.
You have great success without being, they don't notice you on the street, do they?
Yeah, they do, actually.
From movies?
From movies, and because I sort of, some people change a lot over the years in terms of their appearance. I feel like I sort of look the same. For instance, if you saw a picture of me when I was a baby, you'd go, oh, that's Yeardley. It's 100% Yeardley. There'd be no mistake. So, and I do a lot of press for The Simpsons, so you'd be surprised. Pretty much every day somebody comes up and says...
Okay, what's Miles about? You play his mother?
No, I play his guidance counselor.
And he does what?
So it's about this young man who wants to get out of his small town in Illinois, and the way he figures out he can do this, because he doesn't have any money for college because his father squandered it on his mistress, is that he will get a scholarship for volleyball. The problem is there's only a girls' volleyball team at his school, but he joins the team anyway because he's like, you know, I should be able to do that. You can't discriminate against me because I'm a boy. And it causes quite a ruckus, and it's based on a true story.
Really?
Yeah.
Does he play with the team?
He does. But then other teams start to boycott the matches, and there's a petition to say you can't have this guy on the team. And ultimately, he's kicked off the team, but he ends up taking a chance and just going to Chicago anyway, because he figures, I will not let this stop me from attaining my dream. It's a really lovely, sweet.
Who plays Miles?
Tim Boardman, and he was such a. It's so wonderful to work with actors who are pretty new to the business. They have there's a freshness and an enthusiasm and a not yet jadedness about them, to be honest. And they have such optimism. It's really lovely and touching and inspiring.
You enjoy doing it?
I do, so much.
Other than Lisa, what role has meant the most to you?
You know, I did, way back at the beginning of my career, one of my favorite roles of all time was I was playing Louison in Moliere's play The Imaginary Invalid at the Arena Stage in Washington, D.C., where I grew up.
No, oh, you grew up in Washington?
I did.
Spent 20 years there.
Yeah, my father was a journalist for the Washington Post.
Named?
J.Y. Smith, J.Y. Smith. That's where the Yeardley comes from.
I thought of Jonathan Yeardley, who also reviewed for the Washington.
Absolutely.
Reviewed books.
So there I was in D.C., and I did this play at Arena Stage. It was one scene, but it was just fantastic. It was so brilliant, and I would get exit applause every night. I had the best time. I was working with an actor named Richard Bauer, who was a company member at the time. And, you know, that was what, in 1982, and it still has such a lasting impression on me.
When we return, we'll talk about dream co-stars, biggest risks, weirdest talents, in a game of If You Only Knew with Yeardley Smith. Don't go away. We're back with Yeardley Smith, the extraordinarily talented Yeardley Smith. Lisa Simpson on The Simpsons. Her newest film is Miles. You've worked with my friend Seth MacFarlane, have you not?
Yes.
Great guy. How does he get away with it? Family Guy, come on. Family Guy.
I know.
Simpsons doesn't do that.
No, we don't. You know, I think it's sort of a case where you test the waters, you see how far you can push that envelope, and if you're able to walk that line where the backlash gets you better ratings and people are still responding to it, then you just kind of go, oh, okay. But it's a really fine line to walk.
Because kids watch it.
Yeah, they do. I know, but you know, I also would always hear from kids who are grown-ups now or kids now, like my parents don't let me watch The Simpsons. So I hope at least, or perhaps there are parents going, yeah, no, you can watch The Simpsons, but now you can't watch Family Guy.
Did Family Guy do an episode of The Simpsons, or Simpsons appear on an episode of Family Guy?
I think it was sort of more that we appeared on Family Guy because we went to Family Guy's town. And that's where, when we did that episode, I actually recorded Lisa Simpson those lines by myself in a booth at the Family Guy studios, which again is unusual for our process.
Did they have you do anything crazy?
No, but I felt, you know, my scenes were with Meg, and I felt so terrible that Meg was so bad at everything, and Lisa Simpson had to be the one to break the news to her. It hurt my heart, Larry.
You ever done characters on other shows?
No, never. I don't have that kind of range.
Why not a Lisa Simpson spin-off?
Such a good idea. I love this idea.
Be Lisa for a second.
Hi, Lisa Simpson.
Would you like your own show?
Yes, I would. Thank you. From your lips to God's ears, Larry. Or
Why don't
Peter
they-
Rice's ears.
When do they give you one?
I don't know. They don't even do merchandise with Lisa Simpson. They don't believe in the girls. Is that true? That's sad.
Okay, we're going to play a little game of You Only Knew, Yeardley. I
Okay.
just throw some... Who was your celebrity crush as a kid?
David Cassidy from the Partridge Family.
Most embarrassing moment?
Well, I had one last night where I was doing, telling my own story at the Television Academy at this event called Story TV. And I had my notes in my hand, and then I realized on the third page of my notes they were upside down. And I thought, oh God, now what? And I have this thing where I really want to be polished and perfect, and it wasn't perfect. But it was spontaneous and authentic, I'm told, but still, it haunts me.
Weirdest talent?
Oh God, these are hard. I don't know.
Okay. What's 3 adjectives that best describe you?
Ambitious, resilient, and determined.
What's the moment you knew you'd made it?
Have I?
Best piece of advice you ever got?
Be on time.
What was growing up in Washington like?
It was great. Washington at that time was sort of like a big, small town. And, you know, I took 3 city buses to school. It was so different than it is now.
What high school?
I went to Murray, which was at that time a very progressive private school, and you know, from the difference between Sidwell Friends and National Cathedral School. And I did school theater, and I was pretty independent, and it was a good place to test those waters, I think.
Did you go to college there too?
I didn't get into college.
I didn't either. What's the biggest risk you ever took?
My one-woman show called More, which I wrote and performed 10 years ago, and it was very personal, which I don't regret, but I do think there's a really, again, a delicate line between spilling your guts and people feeling like that was a great story and or feeling like it was totally self-indulgent. And the reviews were mixed, although the New York Times loved it.
Dream co-star?
The Rock.
Person from history you'd like to portray on screen?
Queen Elizabeth I.
Is there a TV show you're embarrassed to say you watch?
No.
If you could have something named after you, what would it be?
Ice cream.
Funniest person you know?
Oh. These are hard, Larry. Funniest
Okay.
person I love. Ali Liebegot, who writes for Transparent.
A favorite voice?
Everything that Hank Azaria does.
He's incredible.
Yeah.
If you weren't an actor, what would you be?
A ballroom dancer.
Well, she's different. Yeardley Smith will take your fan questions right after the break. The film is Miles, and we'll be right back. Okay, we're back with Yeardley Smith, an incredibly talented woman who is Lisa Simpson on The Simpsons, and we have some social media questions.
Love those.
KGM 1016 on Twitter. Could we ever see another Simpsons movie?
Let's hope so. We're all clamoring for it.
Do you think it'd go beyond 30 years?
You know what? I've been wrong about this answer so much, I now stop predicting.
That's Stonebreakers S on Twitter. How are Lisa Simpson and Yeardley Smith alike, and how are they different?
Well, she's much smarter than I am. But we share a strong sense of justice. And I like to think we both have a great sense of humor.
Alan Courtney on Facebook. Would you do a cameo in a new Maximum Overdrive film?
Oh, do you know that film was a complete bomb when it came out? Like, it was barely out long enough to run the end credits. So it's sort of funny that it's now this huge cult favorite. I don't think anybody's hoping that we make a sequel to that.
Why do you think it is a cult favorite?
Who's to say? I mean, it didn't become a cult favorite in like a couple of years. It took, that film came out in '85, so that's roughly 100 years ago. It's the only film that Stephen King wrote and also directed. And I think at that time, cable was sort of new and they needed things to run. So same with Legend of Billie Jean, which was also a failure when it was released. And they just ran it and ran it and ran it. And if you were an insomniac, you're like, I love that movie.
Who was the star?
Of Maximum Overdrive, Emilio Estevez.
All right, Bryson Knox on Facebook. What do you do to keep Lisa's voice the same? over all the years?
I don't have much choice. I'm not that gifted. I just like it's this. That's all it is. Although sometimes I watch an episode and I think, what is that? You don't even sound like Lisa Simpson in this episode. Like I do notice some inconsistencies, which I feel like are on me.
When she goes off, where does it go?
It goes a little lower. It starts to sound a little bit more like Yeardley.
Nico Veselik on Facebook. Was there ever an episode of The Simpsons that you disagreed with the storyline for Lisa?
Yes. It doesn't happen very often, but there was an episode many years ago where they wrote her having a crush on this boy. And to me, it was a little too over-sexualized. And I thought, she's 8, and while she's precocious, she's not precocious like that. And whenever and it's, again, rare that they write a line that I don't think Lisa would say, I have to fight that fight for my girl. I feel a moral obligation to stick up for her.
For my girl?
Yes. I may not win that fight, but I have to fight it.
How did that episode go?
They changed it.
Carl Monroe on Facebook. What was Jack Nicholson like to work with on As Good as It Gets?
I met Obama several times, and the presence is so enormous and sort of intimidating, and Jack Nicholson was like that, and he's very intense.
It was a great movie.
Yeah.
At Marcus on Twitter, were you very good in The Legend of Billie Jean?
You tell me, Marcus.
Do you speak French when you're working?
No, this whole thing now that's like on Wikipedia, French-born American actress Yeardley Smith now sort of implies that I am French, that I have
You were
dual
born in
citizenship.
France?
I was. My father was a foreign correspondent for UPI back in, I was born in '64, so you remember UPI.
I remember,
Doesn't
United Press International.
Right.
Do you visit Europe?
I do, but again, I couldn't get a French passport because both my parents are American and I'm American, and the French said, no, it doesn't work that way. They don't have that reciprocity where if you're born there, you automatically qualify. They said, we'll give you a visa, and I'm like, I don't need a visa. What about the passport? Like, no.
Christy Johnson, what are your favorite memories from working on Maximum Overdrive?
Well, I do remember it was a very low budget, and they sort of asked me to do my own stunts. And I remember there's a scene where, so we're stuck in this truck stop and the trucks are going wild. And there's a scene where they say, okay, Yeardley, we're going to drive a Cadillac, which is supposedly now unmanned, through the wall of the truck stop. And we only get one take because then we've wrecked the wall and you have to stand there and don't move until we say so. I'm like, okay. And don't worry, the Cadillac will be coming really slowly. I'm like, great. So there I go on my mark and they go, roll it. And this thing comes so fast through that wall. I'm like, ah! And I can't move until they say go, and I thought, well, this is it. This is how my life ends. And finally they said, go! And so I dived to the right, and glass in my hair. I mean, it was kind of but they're like, great shot! I can't ever forget that. That's true.
Was Stephen King nice to direct?
Oh, he's lovely. He was, and he was so
Good guy.
Humble. And he admitted that he didn't know what he was doing, but he was so game. I really enjoyed him.
Great. I enjoy you.
Oh,
Thank
Larry,
you.
what a pleasure. Thank you.
Big thanks to my guest, Yeardley Smith. Be sure to see Miles is out now on video on demand. And as always, you can find me on Twitter at King's Things. I'll see you next time. Say goodbye, Lisa.
Goodbye, Lisa.